All right. So I found a friend of mine named Ken from the UK who has an awesome Instagram and YouTube channel called The Humble Penny. He put up a post on Instagram. I'm like, this would be a great conversation to have with Linda. And it's about how we've been programmed to be poor. How society's programmed us to be poor.
Yeah.
So you want to start?
Yes, start.
All right. Number 10, he works it backwards, 10 to 1.
Okay.
Number 10, you were taught that hard work alone leads to wealth. He says from childhood, we're told to work hard and success will follow. And the wealthy might have started with working hard, but they quickly focus on working smarter. And I was raised very much with this a good work ethic. I learned how to work hard from an early age, and I'm really glad that my dad and my grandpa instilled that in me, and it's super valuable.
Yeah, I do think
you know.
there is a piece of this that is very true.
But and what he's saying here is you were taught that hard work alone leads to wealth, and that just is not true. It is working smarter rather than harder.
It's doing both together, I think.
Yeah. No,
Right.
you need to be able to work to a certain degree in order to succeed financially at whatever you do. But I think there are too many people who keep doing the same thing over and over again, not getting a different result, and
Right.
are not trying something new. And that's part of this whole equation.
Well, I heard this story of this woman who had a pile of bricks in her backyard. And whenever her kids were needing to get a lot of energy out, she would be like, okay, we got to move those bricks again, guys. And she would have them move it from one side of the yard to the other, which is just brilliant. And then a couple days go by, oh, guys, we got to move those bricks again. And she would have them move it. But I mean, there is something to, they were just doing it because she just told them that they needed to.
Yeah.
They didn't ask any questions, and really, I don't know what she would have told them if they did, because there was no point to it. But how many of us have lived the rest of our life like that?
Yeah.
Where we're like, wait, why are we doing this work? Well, this doesn't make any sense. Is there a better, more efficient way to do it? Is there,
Yeah, and I think the proof of concept here is that we all probably know some really, really hard workers who are not thriving financially. And the amount of hard work that they add to the equation isn't the thing that, and again, I think at its most basic core, there's, I think, multiple proverbs that kind of address this, this idea of if you want to eat, go ahead and do some work, in a very modern translation, if you will. And
the Bob Lotich translation.
And so
paraphrase.
So there's something to that for sure. But yeah, that's not it alone. And so I just completely agree with Ken on this. I think it's really, really good. Let's go to number 9. Number 9, you were taught to be a consumer and not an owner. And so the wealthy don't just consume, but they invest. So, and again, I've talked about this a ton, but instead of just buying an iPhone, being a consumer, they invest in the company that all the consumers are buying from.
I think
right?
it's good for us to admit right now that we have never done the swap of I'm not going to buy a phone, I'm going to invest.
Well, it's not about that. It's not about that. Well, it's funny because I posted something on Instagram and whatever, it went kind of viral and tons of people were just saying stuff like that. It's what was it? If everyone would do that, then Apple wouldn't exist. And it's that's not the point. That's not what I'm saying here. And that, again, would never happen. But the point is to think like an owner rather than a consumer. And so, again, I think for illustrative purposes, that idea of if you take $1,000 that you buy an iPhone in 2009 and invest it instead, what happens? I think that's just a really powerful illustration to illustrate the idea of owners build wealth, consumers consume wealth. You know what I mean? And, and it's funny, because we invested in Tesla probably 13, 14 years ago, pretty early on. And my initial goal with that was I want to invest in this company. And if it pans out, we'll buy ourselves a Tesla with the stock.
Right.
We'll sell some off and we'll buy ourselves one. And we got to the point that we could do that, which was really cool, but we didn't do it. We continued to drive a Honda, which I don't regret, because I was more interested in being an owner.
We bought our house instead.
Yeah, no, and that was the thing. We ended up paying off our house,
Right.
in that particular instance from that stock, which is just crazy. But my point is, once we got to that point where we could have been a consumer, we could have sold off all the money that we made and bought a Tesla. Like, I didn't, because I was more interested in being an owner and what the benefits of that, which ultimately a few years later meant that we paid off our house instead by selling off some of that Tesla stock.
Right.
And I think that I just wasn't taught that growing up. That was never anything that
No, me either.
and like part of this is a shift in technology, in that when I was a kid, it was a lot harder to invest in an individual stock or to invest in, ETFs, I guess weren't even around, but invest in the stock market as a whole or anything else. And so I think that was part of why we didn't hear as much about this.
Well, yeah. And I think for me, growing up, when I would see people who were further down the road and maybe had more money, to me, it seemed like, well, they're just rich, instead of you can actually work towards a higher goal than what you already have, which is just to maintain. And I think that is really powerful, in that the idea is that it might take a little bit of work, but you can dig out of the hole that you're in.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think this is one of the most powerful things about finances that so many people do not understand, is that it is a learned skill. It's no different than learning how to cook, learning how to throw a baseball, learning how to play a video game.
Right.
Like, it is a learned skill. And so many people just think that I am just born this way. I'm either born poor, I'm either born middle class or rich, and it's always going to be that way. It's not true.
Yeah.
It is a learned skill that you and I can develop by learning and moving forward. And that is super powerful when you understand that.
Yep. Agreed.
So anyway, let's move on to number 8. So you were taught to obey and not question.
This goes back to the brick thing, doesn't it?
So if you think about school and work, both train you to follow orders instead of question the system. But if you don't question things like why you're working 40 years for a pension, or why financial literacy isn't taught in schools, then you'll stay stuck in the trap designed to keep you broke.
Ooh.
And I would say beyond that too, one of the things that has been most valuable for us as entrepreneurs is questioning things. It's like, why does it have to be done this way? Why is this not working better? Is there a way to do this better? Because all of those questions have led to us creating something that has helped students, which has allowed us to have an income.
Right.
But it started with questions.
Right.
It didn't start with sticking with the status quo of just, this is how it is, let's just leave it.
And I'm going to even take this a step further and say, who are you asking your questions to? Because I think, there are people who can give you some knowledge and some wisdom, but specifically for our business, like, a lot of those questions needed to be directed at God and see what he had to say about our situation, because he has so many more ideas than anyone on this earth, and some of that was us being like, oh, well, this guy's doing it this way. I think we walked through several seasons of looking at what other people were doing and trying to mimic or just replicate what they were already doing, when I feel like God came in and was like, I have a better way.
Yeah.
Don't you think?
Yeah, for sure.
And that's been really powerful. So yes, who are you asking the questions to? Because sometimes it needs to be, my kids can come ask me a question and I will give them a better answer than one of their siblings. But as we mature and get older, you might go to a mentor, but also don't forget to ask that question to God.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And so I think God is part of it, but even just questioning yourself, questioning your behaviors, your beliefs, why you're doing what you're doing.
Sure.
Like, all of that, super valuable. Number 7, you were taught that debt is normal and necessary. Student loans, car payments, credit cards, we're told, are all just a part of life. The wealthy leverage debt to build wealth, while the poor take on expensive debt, increasingly out of necessity due to rising costs that keeps them trapped.
Yeah.
And so again, we're not obviously saying that this is right, but we are just acknowledging that this is the system. This is the way it's set up.
Right.
And
and when you think that, you don't know that there is a way to break out of it. You know what I mean? So it's not necessarily that we're like, you should never have a car loan or a home loan. It's more like, okay, this is where you're at. This is sort of the system that is, that the U.S. runs under. But you can also work to pay those things off and get out of that system. I think that's powerful.
It's the Babylonian system. It's not God's system.
Right.
It's not the way he designed it. And he designed it that we would be free from debt and that we would get out of debt. And so he has a vested interest in that. But if we don't want to break out of the system, if we want to go back to Egypt, it's like, he's going to let us stay
Right.
in that if we want to,
Yeah.
you know? And so it starts with that, like acknowledging, I don't want to be in this system anymore. Lord, can you help me break out of this? And I assure you, he's going to give you ideas.
His answer is
you know?
always yes.
I
yeah.
don't think he's always going to throw money in the mailbox, but I do think that he's going to give you an idea of how to move forward and break out of that.
Right. Well, and just even changing your mindset
Yeah.
of like, I can't even see a way out, see how this could possibly work.
Yeah.
Right.
Number 6, you were taught that talking about money is rude. And this is so funny. Yeah.
Well, I mean, there are some aspects of it, some things that could be rude. Like
Just the other day, our kid asked
know, one
someone
of our
how much
kids.
they made or something.
I can't remember. How much did you pay for this house? Something
Yeah.
like that. And, you know, we all just kind of chuckled or whatever because, you know, as a kid asking the question. So there are some things like that where it's like, it's actually just private information. It's none of your business, but...
No, but the old adage is you never talk about money, politics, or religion. And here we are doing 2 of them in one, you know. But I think what's important is that if you don't talk about it, if it's something that's always private and hidden, like how are you going to learn? How are you going to develop and grow? And I think so many parents make this mistake. They don't feel like they have it all together, so they don't talk to their kids about it.
Right.
When even if you don't have it all together, like share your mistakes with your kids so
Right.
they can learn and not have to go through them themselves.
And even like just in having little kids, like start explaining when they're young, when they want something, why it's like we just don't automatically buy what you want all the time. They don't understand that it costs money to turn on the electricity every day. And this is something I've learned from them recently, is just that they don't understand what costs money and how all those
works
things
together.
need to work together. And so this is why we make certain decisions, is because I would rather have air conditioning and electricity and running water than Chick-fil-A every single day or whatever the thing is that they happen to want.
All than getting a pair of Jordans.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, he calls them J's. So that's the thing,
It is a thing.
I guess.
Which he did
I
get.
sound real
but
old right now.
I know. But yeah, it's like, well, yeah, you can have a cool pair of shoes for your birthday. We're not going to buy you 75 pairs of shoes that you're going to grow out of before you can wear them twice. No. You know, it's like I would rather
Have food
to eat.
Electricity. Yeah.
Right.
That's
so,
smart.
I mean, but they don't understand those concepts. And so I think starting when they're young, but just continuing that same pace as they are able to understand more information.
Yep.
It's like, it doesn't have to be, this is how much I made. I mean, at some point, I think we're going to probably teach them how to balance a budget and all that stuff. But at this point, it's like any awareness we can bring to them of how the world works, how, this system goes, and the rules we kind of have to work with
Yeah.
is helpful.
All right, let's go to number 5. This one's really good. You were taught that stability is more important than freedom. So go to school, get a safe job.
Yeah.
Like, I remember hearing that. And the interesting thing about that is that the stability in a job is an illusion.
For sure.
And this whole thing sounds very, very similar. Again, back to this Egypt thing of when the Israelites were complaining about, I guess it was the manna in the wilderness. So like, can we just go back to Egypt?
Right.
We were slaves, but we had stability in that we were getting food each day.
It's amazing, isn't it?
Like, and if you look all throughout the Bible, it's like God is interested in bringing freedom to his people in various forms and fashions.
But I think what that means sometimes is that you are just trusting in the Lord every step.
Yeah, because the stability is an idol.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
It's funny how I feel like once you start trusting in something, he starts putting it on shaky ground.
Something you shouldn't.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I think he's done that for me several times in my life.
too.
Not that I can't like have some form of trust in in anything, but when I am making it an idol, I feel like he challenges me in that and lovingly brings me back to putting all of my trust in him.
Yeah, it's easy to, be in a job for 10 years and just assume and to put your trust in that paycheck. And put your trust in that job as your provider. It's easy to do that. It's hard not to do that.
Right.
But when we're in that position, like we are not trusting the Lord fully. And I mean, I'm speaking from experience. Lord had to work this through me multiple times because I kept on like going back, trying to, was it Proverbs 3 talks about leaning not on your own understanding, and like I kept trying to lean on and rely on, either this source of income or this source of income. I'll put my trust in this.
Right.
And he's like, no, I am the one you need to put your trust in. I am your true provider. I'm the source.
Right.
And so that stability piece too. What's interesting about this too, like I'm thinking about this another way. One of the things, if you heard me talk, I'm a fan of Elon Musk, like admittedly, but I'm also going to say like, not everything. Okay. Like I'm able to, chew the meat and spit out the bones, and he's not a perfect guy. He's not my moral role model by any means, but there's some things that I really admire about him. And one of them is this right here. So for example, I don't know the exact numbers, but he co-founds PayPal. Okay. Incredibly successful 20 something years ago or whatever, sells out of it, walks away with, I think it was 30 million or 80 million, somewhere in there, tons of money, lots of money. Okay. At that point, every financial advisor, every wealth expert, whatever would say, all right, you got a whole bunch of money now here. We need to invest it here, and you can just live off those dividends the rest of your life. You can pass on millions to your kids. You're done. Right?
Yeah.
Okay. That's what most people do. That is the process. You cash out, you made your money from the big sale. It's like now you're set for life. You buy a yacht.
Right.
And
Now you
live
can
off
do
your
whatever
money.
you want. Yeah.
Yeah. But when you are purpose driven, when you understand I am on this earth for a purpose, and it's not to sit and be on vacation for the rest of my life, you behave differently. And he did that. And that's one of the things I admire so much about him. He took all of that money and dumped it into this other company called SpaceX, which he was trying to get off the ground, trying to build a rocket company. Again, like the insanity of this, I love it so much. Like he didn't become a rocket scientist. He didn't go to school for rocketry, but he started a rocket company.
Rocketry, is that the right word?
I don't know. I'm making it up as I go. But anyway, he didn't start a company, or he didn't learn about this. He read books to become educated enough to build a rocket company, which ultimately was better than NASA in almost every possible way.
It's crazy.
Way cheaper, more efficient, better. Like everything's better.
Cooler looking.
Cooler looking, great. But my point in all of this is he took that, let's say $30 million, whatever it was, and he had 3 rocket launches in order to succeed. And if he didn't succeed by the third one, SpaceX was going to be done. The first 2 blew up. Rocket goes up, blows up. Millions of dollars down the drain immediately.
Like exploding, blows up.
Yeah.
Yes.
Second one goes up, blows up. Again, he's poured all of his money in. He's down to that third rocket. All of his money that he earned from that is in that. So he's not going after stability. He's going after his purpose. He believes this is really important that we get people onto Mars and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, whether or not you agree with that doesn't really matter. But the point is that he is driven by purpose rather than just chasing the stability of having money.
Yeah.
And then, I think by God's grace, we'll see, time will tell, that third rocket did not blow up. It succeeded. And then SpaceX has gone on to do all kinds of amazing things at this point with a whole lot of potential in the future as well. But
I know.
But the point is that he wasn't chasing stability.
Right.
And I would argue that he was chasing freedom in some form or fashion based on something that was important to him,
Right. Yeah,
So
I like that.
I love that. Anyway, number 4, you were taught to fear investing, but not fear wasting time. People say investing is too risky, but never question the risk of working 40 years and retiring broke.
Whoa.
Time is your most valuable asset, but most people never leveraged it for money to work for them.
Wow.
Yeah, I agree. Like, because they're two different things. So first off, I was taught that investing is super risky. It's like going to this casino. Like you might as well just go, play the slot machine. So I had this perception that it's way more risky than it actually is. And then on the other hand, in terms of wasting time, I feel like society all but encourages you to do that through your mid-20s. Now, your parents might not.
Just live for
like
today.
what are your friends saying when you're in college?
Right.
You know what I mean? Like they're not saying, hey, you should really get on with what God's called you to do. It's like, I literally quit a job to go to a party when I was in college. I had a job. My buddy said, hey, why don't you come over here for the weekend? It's like, I got to work. And I was like, I'm just going to quit. And I literally quit my job to go to a party.
Oh my gosh.
While I was in college. So my point is that.
This is how you know Bob's been redeemed, because he does not, this is not how he lives his life anymore.
Yeah. Growth, right?
Right.
But my point is that there wasn't any fear about wasting time. And I'm not at all against leisure activities. And, every single night, you and I sit down and watch a show before we go to bed. Like there's a time for work and there's a time for rest and play and all that stuff. So I'm not saying that, but if, and again, going back to a situation where it's like I was in a job I could not stand, that I was not doing the work I was called to do. I wanted to get into the work I was called to do. I didn't know how to get there. I had a choice. It's you can either spend a lot of your free time wasting time, whatever, at this point, scrolling on Instagram or watching Netflix or whatever the thing might be. Most of us have at least an hour a day. And I think the average is like 3 hours a day or something for all those activities. And so we can continue to do that, and I guess that's the thing. It's like, I was never afraid of that because it's just drifting. It's just floating down the river and it's peaceful. Like, or not peaceful, but you know what I mean? It's like easy. It's And so you're just going with the flow, and it's a little bit more work to swim upstream and not waste time, or not waste as much time.
Right.
But that was a significant thing for me. And again, society is never going to, you're never going to see a Netflix ad that says, all right, you've watched 2 hours a day, go turn it off. Like they're not going to do that. Like you have the opposite. Like Instagram is, have the best engineers in the world designing it to make it as addictive as possible to make sure that we just keep scrolling over and over and over again.
Right.
So that is where the momentum is going. So we have to work against that to not be that. But that's what's so tragic, is that society has taught us that investing is risky, but it's not risky to waste your time away.
Yeah, agreed.
Number 3, you were taught that wealth is only for, quote, special people. Many believe that rich people are lucky or born to money. They hate people who've built some wealth rather than learn from what might have got them there. And building wealth is not about luck. It's about learning the right strategies, adopting the right mindset and habits, being patient while making sure your money is at work tax efficiently. So, this is what we were talking about earlier.
Well, yeah.
It's a learned skill.
It's a learned skill. There's so many ways to make money, and make money doing things that you love doing, even as a side hustle or whatever. You can get any kind of education that you want.
Yeah, it's available.
It's available. You can go to the library.
Again,
you can go
this
to...
is how Elon Musk started SpaceX, by going to a library and reading books about rocketry.
Online resources, there's so much there, and there's so much free resource there to even just get you started in the right direction. It's like we have this opportunity, and to not seize that opportunity, I think is it's a waste of our stewardship.
Yeah. No, I think that's a good point. Yeah, there is so much available to us, but it's hard. It's really hard because there's so much distraction and there's information overload.
Yes.
And I think that makes it so much more difficult. But regardless, it is a challenge that we face today, but it's still, I do think as stewards, that is something that,
But there's still so much opportunity.
Yeah.
And I mean, that could be, I think, its own podcast episode right there, is just the idea of how do I minimize the distractions so that I can focus on the opportunity in the direction where God is leading me.
Yeah.
But I mean, that would be the goal, right?
Yeah. All right. Number 2, you were taught that saving money is enough. Inflation is killing your savings. Your money loses value every year if you're not investing in it. I feel like I talk about this all the time. And so
you do.
I hope, dear listener, if you're listening to this, you're like, man, he is always talking about inflation. Yeah, because it's a big deal. And I feel like so many people just don't understand, which is why we need to talk about it so much.
Well, it's addition instead of multiplication anyway. But in this case, with inflation, it's subtraction. Saving is subtraction.
Yeah, because it's like, I think,
what you have.
And this is the big problem with it systemically, because it's the frog in the pot that's slowly getting warmer and warmer and warmer. And the frog doesn't jump out until it boils and it's too late. Because if we saw in our bank account, like the inflation we had just a couple years ago, if we saw that I think it was over that one course of the year, like the reported inflation was like 8% or something. And the reality was probably closer to 15% over that 1 year, which might have been 22 or something. I forgot what it was. If we pulled up our bank statement and we saw that 10% of our money was pulled out, literally withdrawn from our bank account, everybody would be going nuts.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Right. Yeah.
Even if it was 1%.
Right.
You're like, nuh-uh, where are you taking my money?
Where'd my money go?
Literally, that's what's happening with inflation. And people don't realize this and understand this.
Right.
And so what this means is that our money becomes less valuable with each passing year. And it's the same thing as someone going in our bank account and literally pulling out 3 or 5 or 8 or 10% from our bank account. And we'd be so upset about that. But because the number is still the same, even though the purchasing power is way less, we just sit there and mindlessly just keep going on. No big deal. No big deal. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It feels like you're like really fired up about this.
I don't know. It makes me angry. And so the answer to this is, at a minimum, have a high yield savings account that, at the time of this recording is earning something around 4%. Okay. So we use Ally, we use CIT Bank, and there's a handful of others out there that are paying good interest rates. And you need to be doing that. And then the even better thing is, especially if you're thinking long-term, is to be investing in the stock market or in some form or fashion where it's going to be going up, and it's going to be going up faster than the inflation rate.
Right. Multiplication.
Yeah, for sure. All right, number one.
Number one.
You were taught to trade time for money. So most people spend their whole lives working for money instead of making their money work for them. So if you don't build passive or semi-passive income or invest in assets that appreciate in value or produce income, you stay stuck working for money forever. And again, this is all part of that equation. I mean, I've talked about this before, but I had such an aha after making one of my first investments into a mutual fund at age 22 or 3. My mentor suggested it, and so I went and did it. And I remember getting a quarterly statement back. And I looked, and I had made $97 over that quarter. Or let me rephrase that. My money had made $97 over that quarter. And I remember looking at that and being like, whoa, that's crazy. Because I think I was making like $16 an hour at that point. So this represented over 6 hours of my life that I didn't have to work.
Right.
Because my money was working for me. And that has ever since gotten me so excited about this idea of how do I get money working for me rather than me constantly working for money.
Yeah, I like that. Because then it's like you make a good decision one time and it just pays you back. And for someone like me who, we've talked about this where it's like the willpower is the thing that I feel like I don't have. But the thing about that is that no one actually really has it.
No one has the consistent willpower that it needs.
Right.
And I say no one, like 99% of people don't.
Right.
Like
there's a few people who are
really
real intense, and just really, really diligent. But they're only like that in certain areas. They can't possibly be like that with everything.
And that's why systematizing is so important. How do you make a set it and forget it system to do it for you?
Right? Yeah. So I love this. That's super exciting.
Anyway, so these are his. So
great list.
Go check out the Humble Penny. Ken's awesome. Great Instagram account and YouTube channel. Great guy, fellow believer. But I just thought he had something really great here, so I wanted to share it. Yeah. So did you enjoy it?
I love that. Yeah.
So let's all break free from these limiting beliefs. These things that I feel like a lot of societies try to put on us, and let's live free. Let's live free. Let's not lean on stability. Opt for freedom, moving in that direction.
Well, and ultimately, I believe that that's what God has for us.
Yeah.
And so I think this is a great list, but I think it would be great to also ask the Lord in your own personal time, like, what am I believing that is against what you say?
What are those limiting beliefs? What are those lies I might be believing? That's a great question to ask.
Yeah.
So take some time, ask that today. And that's all for this one. We'll see you in the next episode. Thanks for joining us on the SeedTime Money podcast. And remember, money isn't the goal, but it's simply a tool to help you fulfill your purpose and your calling. And we'd love to help you achieve true financial freedom faster with our email newsletter. So if you want exclusive money tips and hope-filled encouragement in your inbox, head over to seedtime.com to get signed up.